All right, welcome to our discussion on the themes that are present in Akira, or at least the ones that we see.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them are pretty obvious, and
Yeah.
I think one of the ones I've got kind of sectioned out is maybe quite as many people, at least here in the West, probably don't see or probably weren't looking for, but probably also live themselves. So maybe that's why they don't see it. But we'll get to that one in a second. But I think it's definitely the obvious one. We're sitting there looking at the
Yeah.
picture behind us. Is
the atomic bombs.
he started writing this in '82, talking about Katsuhiro Otomo, and wrote it for 8 years. '80s was full of nuclear news with us and the Soviet Union and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about people that were adults in the '80s were kids right after the end of World War II, and I think that's what Otomo did. I think you look it up that Otomo was like born in the early '50s or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 54.
Yeah, yeah. So he's a little bit different of a mentality than a kid that was like born, like maybe in like '35 or something, that actually grew up and then saw his country get defeated.
Yeah, he was born in 1954. Yep.
Yeah. So he was definitely in a. Yeah, we weren't out of Japan until 51, 52, something like that, without looking.
Okay, so he
So
he was like born in the post American occupation of Japan.
It's almost like a new colony called Japan, because they really was forced into being reshaped at that point. So, and then you get into him and the student Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli and all those guys. How much of everything they have is kind of anti-war and post-war messages and stories and stuff that he's definitely coming along through that vein. The Akira, the first movie that really came out to kind of do that was Godzilla. It came out in '54, the year he was born.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
And everybody thinks, Godzilla's a cool monster movie. It's like, go back and watch the first movie. It's not really a monster movie. It's Godzilla was not the monster. He's not like a force of evil. He was a byproduct. He's a reaction to an evil, power hungry government, and that's the thing that people in Japan were trying to grasp, is like that. I think we were the bad guys, and how do we move forward here? Because our relatives and our family fought on that side, and probably an interesting like research kind of paper or psychology thing to get into, of how you grow up in that kind of environment. I don't fully understand it. I'm directly descended from it, and then have been interested in a lot of like post Civil War history, because I had family members that fought for Lee and on his side, and they lost, and they came in and were subjugated for the next couple of decades. And so it's the same thing with Japan. So it's a mindset I don't think a lot of people have a very good grasp on right now, or these days at least, without going back and really researching some history. But
I think that there's probably a lot of, and this is shown in the films, is it's a lot of the government imposing their will upon the people, and it's not necessarily maybe that the people and the individuals had malice intent. It's that they were following the government that had malice of intent.
Yeah. At this point in the film Akira, you're in I almost say a post US 2026 world, where
very much
where you have a very two-sided world, and a government that everybody on both sides confuses the other side, or accuses the other side of being corrupt and evil. And
you could add like a line to at the beginning of Akira and be like, oh, due to a pandemic, there are lockdowns and people are revolting, and it'd be like, okay, yeah, sure.
You got the societal decay and all the conspiracy stuff that's kind of is like the background of all of this, and it's like, that doesn't sound familiar at all, does it?
Right.
You walk outside and go to downtown Roanoke on Saturday night, and you come back and you're like, okay.
And the government in Akira is presented as self-serving, is presented as power hungry. Like they are the antagonists of this entire story.
Yeah. And then there's a struggle in there too. You have the military and the like what was it, the super executive council, or the superior executive council,
like
whatever it was.
the Congress.
which is
Yeah.
the group of people that make decisions for your interests. And um and really, I think I said something about that when we were talking about the plot stuff, that Akira and Tetsuo are really the same. It's the same plot line, same sort of storyline, just recycling history, repeating
Right.
itself. That there's debate of like they wake up Akira, was Akira just being kind of reborn into Tetsuo, or is it just a power source that's in everybody and just some people channel it or something like
They,
that? But
they say at one point they talk about how like amoebas are hungry, and
yeah,
I think the idea is that there's a power that exists that humans and all of nature are capable of uh, great destruction and great creation, and that humans are uniquely capable of almost a transcendence
yeah,
that these espers are able to tap into.
yeah,
And that's what happens to Tetsuo as he starts to tap into this capability that is in everyone, but maybe certain people are just more sensitive to it.
yeah. And really, while I'm on that sort of kick on the post-war stuff, that's kind of the other, what I thought was the other kind of big theme in it, and it's the absence of fathers.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, they are all orphans.
yeah, and it's not from the same point that you think that when you say that here, you're thinking, well, it's just dads that don't want to take responsibility and are being baby daddies and all that kind of stuff. That culture that's here, it's like absence of fathers. And when you're thinking of this in terms of Japan, is one, they lost an emperor, and be like us having not just a king, but almost sort of like a what we would kind of hold as like a Jesus level king,
Mhm.
that he was a deity and that he was supernatural and he was pure and good. We pantsed the emperor in front of the world and paraded him around. It's like, look at this little dude. It's like, this is your deity, and humiliated him, humiliated that whole side of that culture. Um, he was the head of the nation, and you kind of cut that off, and that's a tough thing for this is you're thinking about it too. This is not like an internet society. This is a society that got their information off of the little radio
Right.
by the family table, and that was very curated information that was given to them. And um, even up until the end of the war, most people thought Japan was winning, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it was like, we
Nope.
they did what? They blew up what city?
That definitely could be seen in both the deification of Akira and the little religious group that they show.
Yeah,
So Akira,
I think that's
if you
completely like the
yeah
emperor.
if you may say Akira is like an emperor analog, and when the emperor was depanced, as you say,
They
uh,
that's the historically that's the most accurate thing to
yeah,
say is
it
it's just like they took him around on a little place
yeah.
everywhere you went to and just like here he is.
And when they did that, it destroyed something, and that was the explosion for Akira, but also created something.
The other part of the
Yeah,
absence of fathers in post World War II Japan is that most of the fathers were dead,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's the
More.
thing that you don't even think about is that, like, I don't have the numbers of that, but the percentage of fathers that were killed in battle and killed in on top of that and killed in the two cities in Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge group of people that were just instantly removed from society. You had a lot of kids that were raised by grandparents, or sometimes even I think you saw it in minus one, in Godzilla minus one, to where two different people, they find a child in the ruins of the city, just take the child and start raising it, and there's a next door neighbor that's like raising kids that aren't hers because
Mm-hmm.
that was all that was left, and it
Right.
was just, it's like you could either like, well, let these kids like just wander around outside your house until they starved to death and died in the street, or you could you could start raising, sort of step up and start raising them again. That's another reality that I don't think people really can really grasp. I mean, if you go back and I love that in minus one, if you go back and look at how they portray Tokyo at the beginning of that, and how it was literally just years after, just rubble still. And as he got a job to start working, collecting mines and all that stuff, or clearing mines for the Navy, he got enough to like build a little stick and paper house. Then it's still in the
Yeah.
middle of all this other rubble. And again,
Um.
when you're having McDonald's Uber to your house and, and charging your electric car, you're not thinking of a world like that.
I'm not sure if this as an American, it's kind of embarrassing to admit that I don't know our own history, but thinking about culturally, I don't really see a similar addressing of single parenthood or fatherlessness after like World War II. Because
Yeah.
I mean, that obviously had to have happened because a lot of men died in World War II.
Yeah.
Because like right after World War II, that was your like Leave It to Beaver, you know,
Well, that's the
that era where they really were
that's when that whole baby boom started. As all the soldiers came back.
right. They came back, and then there was a baby boom. But
Yeah.
there had to be a kind of like you're saying the fatherlessness issue where the dads died, or is it that the most of the men
Yeah.
died didn't have children because they were too young?
I think, and I think that's probably a little bit of difference between our war effort and their war effort is that they got so depleted by the end. If you get into the history of like the even like kamikaze pilots and stuff towards the end where they were just desperate, just trying to figure out ways to
Right.
stop our advance on them, they were taking pilots, giving them sometimes less than 8 hours of training, putting them into a plane and like go find somebody and blow it up. And
So it was just the percentage of the men that were killed in the war
you burn through
dwarfed what was in America.
You burn through your 18 and 20-year-olds in the first year or two of it because
Yeah.
once once we started advancing through the Pacific, it was very violent warfare, and we lost a lot of people, but not on the scale that they did.
Also, they were involved in World War II for a lot longer than we were. So
there's a lot of our men were taken captive and eventually released. They were treated horribly when you get down into the Philippines and Bataan and that area. But the Japanese that were on islands where they lost the battles stayed in holes, and we had literally had to go around with flamethrowers and just burn them in the holes because they wouldn't surrender.
Well, there was that one story. The guy was like 20 something years after the war and ended. He was still on his post in some island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean that you have that, and then
well that just goes right into and this is I think this is more of an 80s kind of theme is youth rebellion.
Well, really, if you stay on the father's thing for
Okay.
another segment on that, that when you get into the 80s part, you got that next generation. Once Japan got rebuilt and started to kind of get prosperous again, and then started to kind of exceed us in terms of prosperity.
Well, that was in the 80s was when you started hearing about how technologically advanced Japan is compared to America.
So that next group of people went into business, and they became that big businessman generation. And those guys were absent because they
were working all the time.
They would get up, go to work before any of the kids were up. Even if whether they finished work, they had to go out with their companies and go to karaoke or go drinking with the guys so that it could be a cohesive unit. And then come back home at 10 o'clock after everybody's in bed. There were kids that never saw their dads. And
you mentioned before in a previous segment that Otomo left home pretty early because he wanted to go out on his own and he wanted to write, or not write, but he wanted to draw for a living.
And every time I hear about those kind of stories in Japan, it's like you don't ever hear like, oh, my mom and dad didn't want to let me go.
Yeah.
It seems like in Japan, they're like, good luck.
Yeah.
The guy from Jiro Dreams of Sushi goes out to start being a sushi chef, learn sushi when he's like 14.
Oh, jeez.
And his dad's like, okay, bye. Do it well.
Yeah.
Don't shame us. And you're like, wow, okay. You get 14-year-olds here. They're like, Mom, make me some pizza pockets on my video. I can play my video game.
Yeah. Anymore, it's a decade after that.
And then you take that generation, that next generation is kind of the ones that were raised by, and I think that's where our Western culture from the 60s and 70s kind of infected a little bit of Japan too, where even the guys that were around their families, it was just such a demasculinized group of people that, and I think that completely came from us of being, whatever words you want to throw into that, the feminine movement and the kinder parenting and all that other kind of stuff, that the few fathers that were around were kind of
meek.
They were pantsed as well, just like the emperor. So you went through this 3 generations of kids that pretty much were absent any kind of like masculine male role models. And I think that background coming back into Akira is kind of, I think it's easy to see where he had the ideas of how to draw the society and how to when you take all that away, it kind of gets into kids and motorcycle gangs fighting with other kids dressed as clowns and motorcycle gangs, and how quickly it evolves when you remove that from society. And he does that with, you kind of get that more in the end of the movie where Kaneda and Tetsuo, you get flashbacks to where they were both orphans.
They were, in the orphanage.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you talk about how the Japanese culture got to the where they were, and while there may have been similarities to how the West evolved, the similarities in the youth culture of like this biker gang, like thinking like the 80s, the biker gangs of the 80s in Japan, and essentially punk culture. Not necessarily in the West, it wasn't really centered around bikes, but it was the aesthetics and the mentality and just the culture of the people who were the teens at the time seems very similar, and it seems like maybe we got to the same place from two different directions.
Well, yeah, again, their success and technology and all that stuff kind of came from us helping them rebuild.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
And
there was definitely American culture influenced the growth of Japanese
I think
culture.
that time
Absolutely.
of the 80s, there was that was a big meshing of cultures.
I've seen people make comments about how like the existence of anime is due to the American involvement in the rebuilding of Japan.
Yeah.
Like it's like that meme with the dominoes. It's like America drops a bomb on Japan, and then you get modern day anime.
Yeah. But the next note I had was about the Colonel. I think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Thing he's kind of my hero of the movie, because he is the only, like, in Akira the film, talking about Colonel Shikishima. Is that how you say it?
Good enough.
He's like the only old school man in terms of like sort of like a World War II era guy or a 50s era guy.
Oh, he's absolutely like a General Patton kind of guy, you know. Yeah.
He's trying to quell the out of control society with all the riots and stuff. Military is sort of directing the police and backing up the police.
Well, he said multiple times throughout the films, he's like, "I'm a military man." Gotcha.
At the same time, he's trying to stop an out of control corruption in the government. The government's like, I can't remember do you remember what the rat guy, when he was taking money, what that was about? I remember like he flees with like a whole briefcase full of money.
I think it was just like bribes and stuff.
It
was just corruption.
Just random bribes.
Yeah.
There's probably maybe some more detail on that in the books too, I would hope, but I think that gets kind of just lumped into this one little rat character in the in the movie. And the Colonel, the same guy, Shikishima, he's trying to protect the psychic kids from being used by adults. And you think that, like, early in the movie, you think that this military group and the scientists are doing all these things to these kids, but it's like you find out that they're trying to keep the kids from blowing up Japan again. That they're trying to figure out what's wrong with them, how to keep them from getting out of control, and they're keeping them kind of at bay instead of like doing bad things to them. And that was always my assumption the first time I watched it, is like these kids are blowing up stuff with their minds because of what the government's doing to them. It's like, no, the government's trying to figure out how to keep them from blowing up stuff with their minds.
That's definitely something that an easy conclusion to come to when you're watching the movie is that, well, these kids are this way because the government is making them that way. When it's more, and they kind of talk, like I said, they talk about the evolution of humanity and stuff like that, when it's more that these kids are experiencing these powers and the government is trying to control the power.
Yeah. And I think that's why at the end of the movie, the Espers like transport Shikishima away from all the destruction.
Yeah.
So he's protected. And I think that's a nod to the fact that they recognized that he was trying to help them and he was trying to protect them.
Oh yeah, the Espers definitely never seemed like they were afraid of him.
Yeah. So Shikishima is my guy. He's me if you put me into that movie. And like
he's definitely going with the whole father figure. He's definitely the father figure of the film.
There's societal decay and conspiracy everywhere, and he's the conspiracy theorist. It's like, what's wrong with all of y'all? But it's easy to come off of that maybe the first time you see it, thinking, Shikishima, he's the bad guy. But yeah, I thought the father thing was pretty interesting through that movie. I don't know I would have pulled that out from watching it the first time. A couple watches and a little bit of reading on stuff. It becomes if you kind of watch it with that with that framing, you'll see. I think you'll see it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But